Good evening and welcome to today's EDA webinar. We're very grateful to be joined by Graham Furman tonight. Just before we get started, a couple of announcements. One is that there's going to be a special webinar next week on Friday, which will be Friday the 19th of March, which will be on ringing in Australia. So please do check in or contact me for any details of that, should you wish. In terms of other notices, welcome if you are joining us for the first time, and also welcome if you're joining us for a repeat. It's only going to be the cameras and microphones on our computers that are active during this evening, so please do feel free to get up and move around and enjoy yourself, and don't worry that you're disturbing anyone. Please do use the Q&A interface if you want to ask any questions. That will be coming to those at the end of the presentation. I think that tonight's talk is about 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll get to questions at the end. We'll try and get through all the questions. If you can't find the Q&A button, it's usually hovering down at the bottom of the user interface somewhere, and you might have to click 3 little buttons, 3 little dots to get the to get it up to find the Q&A button. Please also feel free to use the chat interface if you've got any technical questions, or you're not quite clear on something which is going on or need help. I'll be monitoring that, and I'll try and assist you as best I can. So without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Graham. I'd also say he's taken on a very, very brave talk tonight, because it's going to have lots of technological and live demonstration elements. So everyone should be prepared for the best tomorrow's world moments that we might possibly experience. But yeah, broadly, thank you very much, Graham, and over to you.
All right, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to my workshop here in Bosham in West Sussex. And thank you for inviting me to speak about the robots who ring changes on handbells. They're here behind me, so if I just move out the way and so you can see them. So on the left there is Rosie Robot, and on the right is Richie Robot. And as David said, they will be ringing live later on. And also here in the workshop is my wife, Catherine, give a wave. And Catherine will also be ringing with them. So we've got that to look forward to. So I started building the robots about 4 years ago, but it wasn't until last year with the lockdown, which gave me a little bit more time, and in particular the Central Council YouTube competition, that gave me the incentive to actually get on with the job and get them working. I was spending too much time, kept on changing things, not being very happy with things, and constantly making adjustments and so on. And in the end, I thought to myself, I need to get on with it. And I entered them into the August Central Council competition, which I think was ringing not on tower bells or something like that. And unfortunately, they didn't win. They didn't even get a mention. So they were a bit sad about that. But first of all, I'll show you a video clip of them ringing. This is, in fact, the non-winning entry into the YouTube competition. It's the sort of last half of a touch of step and triples. So I'm just going to share my screen so I can get this working. Okay, so hopefully you will see the first screen. Do shout out, David, if you can't. And I move on to the video clip. Single. Well, So that shows you what they can do. So during the talk, I'm going to talk about why I built the robots and how I ring handbells, not thinking so much about method learning and that sort of thing, but really about the action, the arm movement, the action of the arms, and how I built them. Now, 4 years ago, when I started doing this, I really had hardly any knowledge of electronics or mechanics. I did have a head start on the computing side, as I'd worked in the IT industry for nearly 40 years. So don't worry if you don't know anything about electronics or anything like that, because I'll start from the very beginning and take you through the steps that I went through. Nearly all the information that I got was gained from the internet, and in particular YouTube videos, and there's literally hundreds out there which explain everything, right from the soldering wires together to complicated robots. And so I got a lot from that. And as been said, there will be some robot demonstrations, and I've got some ideas for the future as well. So why did I do it? Well, I thought it'd be an interesting project to build, a bit of a challenge. And I didn't think it had been done before, and I don't think I've ever seen a robot that actually rings handbells. There's lots of dumbbells out there and simulators for tower bells, and machines such as the Carter ringing machine and the Woodhouse ringing machine. And although those are sort of mechanical devices, they just generate changes and don't swing any bells. And of course, they don't have a personality. But the main reason was to practice. I've been ringing handbell peals for 50 years. This is the 50th year, I think, I've been ringing handbell peals. And I wanted to be able to practice new methods or in advance of actually starting a peal. When I'm ringing, I need to be able to see the bells moving up and down. Not everybody does, and I needed to see that. It's a sort of rope sight for handbells. And the software, which some ringers use for practicing, was really not much use to me. Able is an absolutely superb ringing software package, and I've used it for a long time, but to practice with it, I just used to play a method, ring a method on it, and just wave my arms up and down in time with my pair. And if I got a bit lost, I could look on the screen and just sort of pick it up again. But it wasn't quite the same as actually ringing with real ringers. About 10 years ago, Graham John started to import some hand controllers which connected up to Able, and you could then use that to ring along with the method. I tried it, but again, it wasn't quite right because the screen graphics wasn't what I needed. So I've got here a video of Graham ringing with these controllers, and just a very short clip here. So that was Able with the hand controllers. A year ago, Graham actually produced a new package called Handbell Stadium, which is much better. And in fact, had this been around about 4 years ago, I probably wouldn't even bothered with the building the robots because this has 3D graphics on the screen, and that the hand controllers have now been replaced, or they became unavailable. So he now makes e-bells, which are like plastic handbells, feel like handbells, look like handbells. And in this clip, you can see them I'll go on a bit. There we go. So in this clip, you'll see them on the right-hand side of the screen. So that's Handbell Stadium. And it is very, very good indeed, particularly in practice mode. And in fact, the newer versions have got even better graphics than that. So what's the requirements? Any project needs to have some requirements. And so my requirements were the robots to have better ring any method and composition with minimum setup time. I didn't want to spend a lot of time programming them every time I want to ring a different method. The robot arm action to replicate the action of real ringers, and the bells had to strike at the right time, not too early and not too late. And I remember when I started, I drew a diagram like this. I envisaged having a sort of box in front of me with arms sticking out of it, with a bell on each one. In fact, the original project name I gave it was ARM, Automated Ringing Machine. But I needed a box to generate the changes, and as each time when a bell was due to ring, it would send some sort of electronic message across to the arm to get the motors in the arm to actually operate. And of course, Able is the best software package to use. So I wrote to Chris Hughes, who wrote it, I think, and I said, is it possible for you to change Able so that it sends out electronic signals instead of playing the bell sounds through the computer loudspeakers? And he said, it already does it because it sends out MIDI messages. And in fact, when I looked on the menus for Able, there is one here, and this in the middle here, you can see on the screen, there's a button there that says use MIDI for bell sounds. And so that electronic output already exists. Now, MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, which I had heard of before. It's a sort of a message standard for transmitting electronic messages between devices. And if you've got a keyboard, you will probably find a socket on the back that says MIDI out. And so if you press a key on a keyboard, then the sound will go out through that interface, and you could send it through to another device to make the sound, perhaps a much bigger loudspeaker or something like that. And I've got some examples here of what you might use a MIDI message for. So the first one is where you've got a keyboard sending it out to, say, a computer. So you're playing a song on the keyboard, but it's actually playing through the computer loudspeakers. Number two there is where you've got like a MIDI file, a whole song in your computer, and you're sending it across to some loudspeakers. Number three, that diagram on the right-hand side, that's supposed to be a church organ. I know it looks like a bed floating on water, but a few years ago when they were installing a new organ at in Bray Church where I used to ring, I was talking to the people there and doing the installation, and I said, how are the messages getting from the organ console to the organ pipes? And he said, it's a MIDI interface, and just a cable with just 5 wires in it. And of course, number four, here we have Able on the left-hand side, send the messages out to the robots, telling them when to ring. Now, at that time, I didn't know how I was going to handle these messages. I didn't know much about them at all. But I looked on the internet, and I found out that what I needed to do was to write or build a MIDI circuit. So on the left-hand side there, you can see the MIDI circuit. There's various components, about half a dozen components of resistors and diodes and things, but I followed a few YouTube videos on how to solder all these onto a board, and that seemed to work. And then just about this time, my son, who knew I was building the robots, said, why don't you look at the Arduinos? And Arduinos are like little mini computers on a board, and they are very good at switching things off and on. And when I looked, I found that I could actually process the messages through the MIDI circuit, and then I could split them up into the individual bells, because I wanted them to go off to the individual arms in each robot. And I'll show you how the Arduino works in a second. And what I did, I put all the components for that control box into a box here. And and I'll show it to you in real life in a minute. The bottom one shows the insides, which is a bit of a mess on wires, but effectively it's connecting up the Arduino to the robots. So I'll just stop the presentation there. There we go. And first of all, I'll just show you the, if I can find it, the Arduino, because this is key, because I've got one of these little boards. This is the Arduino board in the control box. And there's also one for each arm as well, because it kicks off the motors when they have to start working a lot. Very easy to use. You don't have to worry about these components here. It's got an interface, USB interface here, which you plug into your laptop. You write some code for what you want it to do and download it onto here. And it gets put onto some memory here. You can disconnect it from your computer. And then you're ready to go. Now, what I've done here, I've written a little program that switches this little light bulb on and off. And as soon as I apply some power to it, it will start working. Comes on and off every half a second. So that's it's very good at switching things off and on. And it's got a lot of what they call pins around the side where you make your connections. Very cheap, they're about £10 each, and very, very easy to use. So now I'm going to show you the various components. So I'm going to pick up my camera and we get the robots to ring. So I hope this is going to work. So I've got a computer here. This is, you probably recognize this as an Able screen. And then from there, it goes through the cable through to my control box. In fact, I've got a lot of sockets on the front, but in fact, there's only one socket needed for each robot. And we've got the two wires which come up here, across the top and down and into the back of the robots. So that's the setup. And all being well, I can ring some Minimus. So if you're familiar with Able, you've got the methods down the side. So I'll choose one of these. How about reverse St. Nicholas Bob Minimus? And I press the start button. Good. Oh, I'm glad they worked. There we go. Right. Okay. So that's the first demo. And now we're going to move on to the construction. So I'll share my screen again. So we've managed to get our messages into our robots. I thought, first of all, I'll make the thing out of wood because most of the tools and things in my workshop are geared to making things out of wood. Then I thought I'd make them out of Lego because I've seen some models down in Legoland in Windsor. And I also thought, well, perhaps I could use something like Meccano. I looked at angle iron, but then I came across this fantastic product called Actobotics, which is designed for making robots. And there are hundreds of components which all fit together. So
Hello everyone, and welcome to a very special Friday new product post. As you can see, we're in a different venue this time because we actually have the most new products we've ever offered here at SparkFun Electronics. We've got 470 new products. These are all from the Actobotics product line, and they're all robotic products. We've always carried a few robotic components here at SparkFun Electronics, but we've never really carried anything as big as this. The reason why we chose Actobotics is because all of these different components work well together. So you have anything from gears, pulleys, hubs, we've got some shafts, we've got tubing, we've got wheels. All of these things work together easily, so you don't have to pick and choose from different places to make sure things work together.
So I chose Actobotics because not only could I make the actual body of the robots, but also they had all the gears and cogs and everything else that I needed. But the most difficult part was getting the arms and the motors to work together. I experimented with lots of different configurations before I was happy with the arm movement and also the accuracy of striking that I was hoping to achieve. So I've got a video now of some ringing. This is the sort of ringing I was doing on pill ringing. This is the band, in fact, I was ringing with before I moved down here to Boston a couple of years ago on a regular basis. So there's two things to look out for here. First of all, the accuracy of the striking, which is something I wanted to achieve, and also the movement of the arm. If you look at Ollie Cross on the right-hand side in particular, you can see there's three movements. There's the movement of the wrist, the movement of the elbow, and the movement of the shoulder. Shoulder movement isn't very much, so I decided not to include that. But if you look very carefully, you'll see that at the hand stroke, that's the sort of the upstroke, is that the wrist movement starts a fraction of a second after the elbow movement. But on backstroke coming down, they both start at the same time. And when I was building these, I videoed myself ringing a bell and then playing it back in slow motion to see exactly how it's working. So I can get this to work. So the key thing for me was to actually select a motor that would do what was needed. Most motors, a bit like the motor in your vacuum cleaner or hairdryer, they sort of ramp up to their maximum speed, and then when you switch them off, they slowly go down again. I needed far more control over the motor. I needed a motor that would have a specified acceleration, a maximum speed, and a specified deceleration, and also specify how far it's got to move. And if you notice, ringing handbells, it's a very sort of jerky sort of movement, very sudden start and a sudden stop. And I found on the internet these motors called ClearPath. And this short clip coming up is a sort of demonstration of what it can do. The motor is fixed on the right-hand side. You can't really see it very well, on the right-hand side of the screen, and it's driving a belt with a carriage connected to it, and it runs along a track, and you can see how quickly it can actually then start and stop.
ClearPath Operational Mode 2. Move to absolute position, 2 positions. Move to absolute position, 2 position is the mode to use when you want to smoothly move back and forth between 2 positions that are referenced to a home position sensor or switch. To use this mode, open the ClearPath MSP software and configure ClearPath with your motion parameters: speed limit, acceleration rate, and RAS, which is Technic's automatic jerk and jerk derivative limiting feature that creates very smooth transitions in the motion. Next, define your 2 endpoint positions. These are relative to the home sensor position.
So then I needed to connect the motors to the arms, and I started off with a lot of cogs. And so this is a video of an early prototype, probably about 2 years ago. I only had one motor then. Now I have 2, one for the wrist and one for the elbow. So there's one motor driving both, and it's mounted horizontally, and you can see all the cogs in there. Wasn't very good. It gave a very sort of stiff action, rather a bit like a tin soldier. And also the cogs were very, very noisy. If I can get this to work. So I'm just going to stop the video there and just show you a robot which is currently being built, and also show you how I actually did connect the motors to the arms. I hope you're all still with me. So this is one which is partially built at the moment. So you can see the construction of the body, which I'll cover with MDF eventually. And here is the arm with the belt on it here. And so we've got a motor down here, which drives this is the elbow, and it drives a screw thread like this. And as the thread turns round, the arm moves up and down. That's the, that's the elbow movement. And then we have another motor here, which drives another one, which is on this side. Oops. It's not very good at the moment. It drives the wrist movement there. So that's the arrangement of connecting the motors to the arms. And I've got another short video here just showing how it works. So if I share my screen again, we can see. Go on to the next screen. So this actually shows the up and down movement. And if you look at the ends of the arms, I don't know if you can see my pointer there. That's the end of the wrist arm, if you like, which moves up and down here. and the elbow one is on this side. The motor's at the bottom of the screen, can't see those. And you might better see that the wrist moves a fraction after the elbow on the hand stroke, but at the same time at the backstroke. And when I got one bell working, we will see a little touch here. And this shows the sort of front view with the motor at the bottom and the threaded rod going vertically up, which the bell's connected to. So, go. I'll just stop it there. So I just want to move on before we have another demonstration, the last part of the presentation. I just wanted to move on to future developments. So I'll stop the video there and I'll just show you one or two things I have in mind. I've got, I want to build 3 more robots so that I can ring Maximus with five robots. And then I'd like to ring a peel or 2 on them, so I don't think that sort of thing's been done. I bought this little circuit board with a little microphone attached to it, and it'd be fairly easy for me to program this so that when I call Bob and a single, the robots will react to that in real time. They will need to know what method they're ringing to start with, but that touch of Stedman at the beginning, the actual touch was programmed into Able, but I will be able to actually say Bob and single, and they will actually react to it. So they're actually gaining some intelligence then. I also think that the striking sometimes isn't brilliant, and I'll be able to control the striking better. In the control box, it'd be fairly easy that if one bell is, say, a little bit quick, just for me to slow down the message, sending out the message by a few milliseconds. I had to think very hard if it was actually a bit too slow, because if you think about it, you can't really send out the message before it's arrived. But the way to do that was that I would have to slow down all the other bells, and then of course they would actually be fitting in the right speed. And I've got this real novel idea of having a foot switch, which when you press it, the robots start firing it up. So I'll be able to program it so that when the foot switch is pressed, some of the robots start ringing slow and go slower and slower, perhaps good for conducting, working out which one's gone wrong. And then when you take out, you take your foot off the switch, then the robots slowly get right again. So there we are. So that's the end of the presentation. We're going to have another demonstration now. So Catherine, if you'd like to move your chair across, and we're going to ring a touch of minor. It's going to be a touch of London, Cambridge, London. And I'll just grab the camera. And take it over to Able. I've got to change this to 6 bells. Oops. I can do that. Not quite sure the best way of doing it. 6 bells. and I select the touch, which I set up earlier, London, Cambridge, London. So I think we're all ready. So if I point it in the camera in the right direction. So here we go. London. Good, thank you. Good. So there we are. That's the end, David.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That was brilliant. Really good. And I was just thinking, I mean, so it's almost apt that we're exactly a year on from the declaration of the pandemic, and obviously the start of the webinar sequence wasn't long behind that. And you have to be congratulated. That's the first live ringing we've had in one of these sessions. So that's really great, and thank you very much for that. It's very enjoyable. Please do ask any questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and even if it's just an observation on what you've seen tonight. I'm going to start with my own question, which is how much do you need to customize the action to the exact handbell? So if they're different weights, does it need any particular adjustment?
I thought that I was going to have to do that, actually. I thought perhaps the bigger bells would ring a bit slower, but in fact, that wasn't the case at all. And by and large, they're pretty good. In fact, tonight, Rosie was a bit quick at backstroke all the time. I don't know the reason for that. Obviously, having a bit of an off day, as all ringers do from time to time. So I'll have a word with her later and see what can be done. But as I said in the future developments bit, I could put in fairly easy to adjust the striking, which is something which I thought I might have to do. But so far, I'm going to concentrate on building 3 more robots of the same, and that might come as a development later on. And
actually, a related question is: did you actually have to make any adjustments to the handbells themselves? In terms of cap springs and.
Yes, in fact, that was really quite difficult to do, and in fact, I had to adjust the springs to make them strike better. It's really difficult, and in fact, at one time, I thought I would get rid of real handbells and replace them with e-bells. So the e-bells, I thought to myself, well, what I could do is just put a loudspeaker in the mouth of the bell. And so when it was ringing up and down, the sound would come from, from the bell. But when I suggested this to one or two people, they say, well, that would actually spoil it, because what's good about it is that you're actually ringing real handbells. It's not just a simulated sound. It is actually real handbells. So I'm sticking with that, at the moment.
Yeah. And then we've got there's a couple of related questions, observations. How important is it having faces on the robots?
Yes.
To make ringing normal? And I think John's observation is is it his imagination, or is one of them looking slightly panicky?
It's just the funny thing was that originally, as I said, I just thought about having this sort of brown wooden box with arms sticking out, because it was going to be functional rather than fun. And in fact, I had like a day left to finish off building the robots and do everything before I submitted the video for the competition. And it just sort of came to me that I would actually put Rosie in as big red lips and so on. And in fact, Rosie had a really sad face. She produced a very sad face when she heard she hadn't won the competition, and there were a few tears coming down her face as well. But she's okay now.
So, and again a related question. Jennifer Furman, I don't know whether she's known to you at all.
Yes. What's she asking?
Says, you mentioned earlier that the benefit of robots over other mechanical ringers is that they have personalities. Yes. What would you describe as Rosie and Richie's personalities? And P.S. Well done, Dad. I'm so proud.
I said, well, right. Rich is rather sort of a stern sort of person, actually. He doesn't actually show much emotion. But Rosie certainly has a personality, and several ringers have mentioned to me that, she looks, sometimes a little bit frightened, actually. And in fact, ringing handbells can be a bit frightening, just like any other ringing, I think. When certainly if you turn up and you're ringing with other people, you've got to get it right. And I think Rosie is always thinking she's going to make a mistake or do something. So but she's fun. She's fun to ring with.
I think another observation from my point of view is that I really admire the discipline on peel speed, because obviously it all relies on everyone locking into a particular peel speed, and I think I suppose what's your background of that? I mean, are you usually very aware of peel speed, or was that an element you had to adjust to?
Right. Or? So when we ring handbell, what tends to happen, which is not always ideal, you tend to speed up, and so once you get more familiar with what you're ringing, the method or methods, and so after about an hour, you're in a situation where you could be going quite quickly and it's going very well, but then of course, if there's a slight clip and so on, you've got less thinking time to sort things out. Mm-hmm. And so it's not always good to go very, very quickly. But ringing with the robots does have a discipline, because you're stuck with the speed that you're setting able to, and you're sticking at that speed. One thing that experienced ringers do is that they don't hold up for other people. The key thing is you keep going and you ring. You don't ring after people, you ring to a rhythm. And so, because as soon as you start holding up, then the rhythm's gone for everybody else. And someone said to me with these, they say, well, how do the robots hold up for people who are a bit late? I say, well, they don't. We just keep going. We keep going all the time. And that's the way to do it, really.
Yeah, so. And I suppose that sort of gives the related issue. You were saying about having potential voice control interface. I mean, obviously, you could give a very sophisticated library of conducting comments.
Yes, you could actually. Yeah, that's right. And in fact, it didn't come out on the video, but my daughter Jennifer, she recorded all the common method names and commands, because you can change those on Able quite easily. We couldn't actually hear them very well tonight, actually. And then when she'd done all the ones I asked her to do, she put in some other comments at the end, like, that was very good. I enjoyed that ringing. We all rang really well, and all that sort of thing. So that could be built into it as well, of course.
Wonderful. So we've got another few questions. Fascinating. Thank you very much for the talk. Would you say that building robots is possible for the average, not terribly technically minded person?
I think so. There is so much information on the internet, actually, and if you're prepared to spend a bit of time looking at these things and you're determined to do it, it is possible to actually do that. But it's I'm not convinced that the way that I build them now with these components, they're quite expensive. I mean, if you look on the Actobotics and ClearPath websites, I mean, they cost quite a lot of money, and so it's not the sort of thing that could be put into production like Graham John has done with his eBells at whatever it is, £90 a pair. We're talking much more than that. So it's not really a production item, but in fact, if people want to try this sort of thing, I'm sure they could. And you can get a lot of fun of trying to actually build mechanical things just by looking at the YouTube videos.
Yeah, and that sort of strays into the area of the next element, which is ballpark, roughly how much
a lot, actually. Eye-watering, probably in total over £1,500 a robot. So it's the components, the motors and all the aluminium components come from America. So they're made in China, go to America, and then they ship to me. But I couldn't, the construction aluminium parts, they had distributors in Europe, and there's about 3 distributors in the UK. So when I started, I thought this would be okay, very easy to get hold of. But the parts I wanted were never available at the right time. And so in the end, I ended up buying quite a lot from America, and the motors came straight from there as well. But I didn't find anything to match them in terms of their quality or functionality.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because I've considered sort of various motorized or automated bell projects over the years, and you're right. I've not found anything with the right kind of performance. Sort of.
Well, these motors are industrial motors. They're designed for industrial machines, and so not the sort of thing that most people would usually buy for their home robots. I mean, these companies do sell motors, but they're really made for driving toy cars and arms. The latest thing is to have a channel with a camera on it, and so you can remotely control the camera moving along, that sort of thing, but not to driving robot arms as I wanted to.
Yeah. And the comment comes back, the person who asks how much it costs. So it says, actually, that's a lot less than I feared it might be.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Well, I did actually spend, and in total, far more than that, because I had so many false starts. Yeah. I mean, I've got a box full of motors of different sizes, tried them all out and discarded them all. So yeah.
Do you have any plans to take them into schools or other establishments to create interest in ringing, or perhaps not, considering if they're
well, I never thought of that, actually. Yes, I know. Yes, we're starting up handbell groups, after school clubs and things. So quite fun. But if there was another ringing roadshow or something like that, which we haven't had for some time, Rosie and Richie might be interested in coming along. So you never know.
Yeah, I think the last roadshow was 2014, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely due for another one there when it's all feasible. Okay, that sounds great. And so potentially the last question, we'll see how we get on. But what's the worst injury you have sustained in their construction? And I think we can broaden out that any mishaps during construction.
No, no, I haven't had anything serious. I've certainly burnt myself a few times on a soldering iron.
That's
That was
really
probably
great,
about the worst injury to myself. I've had a lot of injury to my brain because there's been a lot of frustrating moments when things haven't worked very well, which is always happened. But I've got enough patience to battle on and get it working eventually.
Any handbells visit the floor during?
Oh yes, yeah, they've dropped. In fact, the way they're fixed onto the robots at the moment is a combination of a couple of screws and some Velcro, which seem to work all right, but it does take a bit of time to fix them on. If you're perhaps at a handball practice and you're swapping bells around between touches, it's quite quick to do, but changing it around on the robots does take a bit of time.
Well, thank you. I can't see any more questions, so it just sort of remains to say thank you again so much for your talk tonight. Really fascinating, and congratulations on integrating all of these live elements. It's been really, really, really great. So just to remind people, we've got our special webinar next week on Ringing in Australia. If you're not a regular visitor or don't get the EDA webinar bulletins, please feel free to drop me a line if you'd like to attend that one. You'll have the email address education@cambridgeringing.info in the confirmation that was sent earlier. But then it just remains for me to say good night. If Graham would like to say good night.
Yes, good night. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, thank you all very much, and we'll see you